the sunshine down in Charmouth at the moment, and yeah, we'll be making a start in a second. So this event is going to be hosted by Dorset Coast Forum and Dorset Council. So my name is Matthew Smith. I'm from Dorset Coast Forum, and I'm the engagement sort of lead officer for Future Coast Charmouth. And I'll be doing some introductions to some other members of the team joining us as well in a second. But before we start, what we want to do is just have a reminder for everyone who hasn't done Zoom for a while, including myself. I'm normally doing Teams at the moment, but I need a reminder on Zoom. So everyone should be muted during the presentation. And if you can put your camera on, I feel like you want to. It's always nice to know I'm chatting to some people in the background there. If you need to ask any questions, you can use the chat function, which I think Nikki has put a couple of bits and pieces in already. If at any point you want to raise your hand to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function in the reactions function, or react in any other way, and then you can unmute yourself and answer or ask your questions. So the first we'll have a look at is before we start on the presentation itself, we always want to hear where attendees have heard about the event from, and then this gives us a bit of guidance for any future events that we might do in terms of where to communicate to. So you should see a poll sort of pop up on your screen asking for you to fill in how you found out about the event. And we always include something like this, like I said, it helps us direct our communications in the future. I'll give you a minute or so to have a fill of that in. Any queries, please let us know in the chat function. And once you've filled in your response, it should disappear. If not, you might need to close it manually. But I can see that some responses are coming through now. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes or so, or 30 seconds or so, just to fill that in. Okay, looks like we've had a lot of people respond. Thank you for doing that. So some introductions to the team then. So like I said already, my name is Matthew Smith. I'm the Future Coast Charmouth DCF or project officer, the engagement lead for the team. And speaking in a second as well, we've got Elliot Salmon Carter, and he's the Future Coast Dorset projects officer. He'll be able to give you some updates on the project so far since we sort of started back in 2024. And then working away in the background, we've got Nikki from Dorset Coast Forum as well. So that's the team that we've got with us this evening. So a bit more information on the project itself. So the program, like I said a minute ago, started in January 2024, and it's going to run until March 2027, and includes an outline business case, or we use OBC for short. So if you see OBC pop up in the future, an outline business case is what that means. And that was submitted to the Environment Agency in October last year. But community engagement is really at the focus from the start of this project. It's the focus at all stages of the program, and it will be trialing projects, development of adaptation plans from April 2025, so a couple of months ago, until project end, which is March 2027. In terms of the team itself, I won't run through all of this. Hopefully you can read most of that. So in terms of the team, we've got the Dorset Council FSEM team. They're the client project managers for the project, and they organise and refine the scope of the project, liaise with key partners, prepare key documents, lead relevant meetings, etc. We've got Jacobs. They are the consultant project managers for the project. And they work closely with the client project manager, so Dorset Council FSEM, and they deliver the technical studies required to produce the OBC that I talked about a second ago. They were the consultant project manager for phase 1, and they're going to be for phase 2 as well, so the delivery stage that we'll talk about later on. Dorset Coast Forums, that's me, or DCF for short, they are the stakeholder engagement lead, and this involves managing the stakeholder and community engagement, running drop-in events, which we've been doing a lot of so far this summer, leading presentations like this, doing schoolwork, community group talks, etc. Dorset Council are also providing support as part of the client project management team, and those teams might involve or do involve the coastal risk management team, planning teams and procurement teams. And the Environment Agency, they are providing support as part of the management team as well, and they are the project funders. So the agenda then, there will be a couple of polls throughout the presentations, similar to the one that you filled in already, but roughly speaking, we're going to stick to the agenda on screen now. So in a second, I'll hand over to Elliot, and he will talk through what Future Coast is all about. what we're trying to achieve with the project, what we've done so far since project start in 2024, what the next steps are, and a final sort of recap and a final notes. I'll then come back in and have a talk about what engagement has happened so far. So we did a lot of engagement back in 2024, so I'll do a bit of a sort of headlines from that. I'm also going to talk about some events we've got coming up in the future, and we've got a baseline survey out at the moment that I'm also going to have a chat through. So I think I'm going to hand over to Elliot now then to come in and do a bit more of the delivery phase, what's happening in 2025.
Thanks, Matt. Hello everyone. So my name is Elliot Salomon-Carter and I'm the CTAP Project Officer for Dorset Council. So today we're going to be talking about the Future Coast Charmouth project, and this falls under the Future Coast Dorset programme. Next slide, please, Matt. So what is Future Coast Dorset? So to put it into context, coastal change is a growing challenge across the country. However, Charmouth and North Swanage are in a unique position to take early action. Dorset Council's received £3 million from the Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme, so from CTAP, and that's supported by DEFRA and funded by the Environment Agency. So these communities will work with Future Coast Dorset to do things such as strengthen infrastructure, improve beach access, raise awareness of coastal risks, and ultimately plan for a more resilient future. These projects have been branded as Future Coast Charmouth and Future Coast North Swanage, and they will run up until March 2027. Next slide, please, Matt. So Dorset Council and local communities have been seeking stronger support for coastal adaptation. In Charmouth, the Shoreline Management Plan sets our shift from the hold the line to no active intervention, which accepts that natural coastal change, including cliff erosion, will put some infrastructure and assets at risk. What the CTAP funding enables us to do is to take practical steps to boost community resilience, whilst also building on local knowledge to prepare for the long-term impacts of coastal change. It is worth stressing that CTAP is a national research and development programme, and there is an emphasis on collecting and sharing learning. This work will also feed into the wider learning generated by the Environment Agency's national programme, so the FCRIT projects, and this will help make a case for future support across Dorset and beyond. We do recognise that the community of Charmouth are asking for practical solutions, and therefore the Future Coast Charmouth project is focusing on delivering tangible benefits. Next slide, please, Matt. So where are we at the moment? So Future Coast Dorset is currently refining the options that can be taken forward in both communities. The project is still in the research and development phase, and not all options from the outline business case will be possible to deliver. In spring 2025, the project moved into phase 1. And so far in this phase, we've undertaken the following activities. So I'll go through what you can see here in terms of what we've actually done so far. So we've reviewed priority actions for delivery, and that's based on the community feedback from last year, from 2024. We've reviewed opportunities to improve beach access, and we're actually currently researching a sustainable beach access design and looking to fund that design and the delivery of that in phase 2. We've investigated rollback feasibility of the Charmouth Heritage Coast Centre, so we're actually working with legal, estates and planning to identify land that can be purchased through the Future Coast Charmouth project to relocate the Charmouth Heritage Coast Centre in the long term. So that's not an immediate thing, that's a long-term planning action. And that's an iterative process, and it will involve extensive community consultation. We've also investigated funding the reopening of the River Char footpath. Unfortunately, after engaging with Green Space at the Rangers and looking at, after finding a practical route, when we did engage with the landowner, they did suggest that they prefer if it remained closed. So maybe there's some further engagement we can do around that. We started looking at the feasibility of working with the River Char Action Group to potentially deliver a natural flood management project that would fit under the theme of nature-based solutions. We're also working with the Southwest Coastal Observatory to implement CoastSnap at Charmouth. That will essentially allow for fixed point photography of the beach and will allow us to monitor the cliffs and the beach over the duration of the project. That again fits under the theme of citizen science, and we'll be looking to work with the University of Plymouth as well to use that asset to feed into a master's research project. that project is dependent on the permission from the parish to implement CoSnap and the actual uptake of the students if they're interested in that project. We've also started to collate data through in-person events and online surveys to support the project decision making. We've also set up a project steering group as well, and we've started planning for phase 2, which, as I suggested earlier, will focus on the delivery of practical solutions. And we've also commissioned consultants at Jacobs to deliver on the technical elements of the project for phase 1. Next slide, please, Matt. Right, so phase 1. So we're commissioning Jacobs, they're a consultant, and we've asked them to carry out the following items. So what you can see here, so I'll just go through these. So for both communities, Charmouth and North Swanage, geohazard risk assessments will be developed. So this includes desk study, data collation, the development of a spatial model, assessment of data, including hazard assessment and projection, and those results provided will support future monitoring activities. We're basically looking at the cliffs and, what might happen and when, and what is the impact, essentially. So as suggested, both communities' monitoring plans will be developed using the outputs of the risk assessment and the work described prior. For both communities, again, an adaptation plan will be prepared for each location. These will be live documents and will set out a strategic framework for coastal change adaptation. For the beach access, as I mentioned earlier, we've got provision there to research and recommend an alternative beach access solution, and that will influence the adoption of the design. The next thing here is the surface and groundwater management. So that's actually a research element, so provision for Jacobs to develop recommendations and costed proposals based on the evidence of where and what type of drainage will be beneficial when installing new drainage systems. We've also got provision to support the citizen science projects at both communities. In terms of planning and building control mapping and guidance, this is actually to look at updating the planning guidance and the maps to reflect the current and future anticipated beach, cliff and slope conditions. So that will be a collaborative effort with Dorset Council Planning, and that will consolidate landslide, coastal erosion and flood risk, providing a spatial framework for appropriate planning actions. And then this last one here is just the revision to desk study the viability of using vegetation to improve stability of the cliffs, and that includes identifying suitable vegetation. Just to note, with these research elements, especially the nature-based solutions, these will be researched in phase 1 and delivered in phase 2 if they're viable. Next slide, please, Matt. So what are the next steps? So I'll just quickly run through these. So the geomorphological and risk assessment. So we need to provide a sound scientific basis for the decision making and the delivery of schemes across the programme. That will build on NSAM2, the National Coastal Erosion Risk Mapping data. And that work will impact decision making, especially including those around future development and whether it's appropriate to the level of risk. So it's an important piece of work. The monitoring will start to monitor both areas until the end of the programme. So that's started now. We're looking at setting up a coastal wardens group if there's appetite. The idea is setting up a dedicated group of coastal wardens to help promote communities to engage with the Future Coast Charmouth project. So one example would be to support a citizen science project. We're also looking at training opportunities as well for those potential volunteers if interested. Begin adaptation plan. So we want to co-create plans with both communities. So that would be a plan for Charmouth and for North Swanage. And that's about paving a way forward and ensuring long-term community resilience. Developing sustainable beach access design is also next. Identifying opportunities to trial the delivery of nature-based solutions in phase 2. We also want to increase awareness of coastal change through ongoing community engagement. So that community engagement will go throughout the project. And very importantly, refining the scope of phase 2. So that's ensuring that both Charmouth and North Swanage are offered practical solutions, so providing tangible benefits in both locations. That's informed by previous engagement and the current engagement. The project does have an emphasis on prioritising the delivery of those tangible things, whether that's built or installed elements or things that modify or support the physical environment, things we can see on the ground. So this means in Charmouth, for example, we note that rollback and access are very important, and that's why we're trying to focus on those two at the moment as high priority items to deliver. And the last slide, please, Matt.
This might be one of mine. Sorry, Elliot. It's just another poll.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I know you got your last slide. Sorry, dropping that on you. Yes, we've come to the second poll of the evening, and this should again hopefully pop up on the screen any second. Please let us know it doesn't. So as we've heard from Elliot, there's still a lot of options that are sort of we're testing the sort of feasibility and viability for, and we really want to know the sort of community and stakeholder sort of preference on what these might be. So the following options that should be on the screen here are still being investigated for their viability. And we don't have the resources to do all of them. So we really want the community's preference as to which one we should be pursuing. So again, similar to last time, I'll give you a few minutes to sort of vote. I know it takes a while to sort of read down through some of them. And if you've got any sort of queries, please speak up or put them in the chat at all. I can't remember there's an option. Yes, there is, should be multiple choices. So if there's some that you want to, there's more than one you want to add, then feel free to do so. I should add that while you're doing this, that the polls we've collated tonight, they're being collated with other responses to questions that have been at our in-person events, and there'll be some future events these questions are being asked for as well. So they'll all be collated and amalgamated together to get overall people's preferences from these engagement events. Okay, sorry. Sorry, Blind, I've got so many screens on, I can't actually see your question. Do you want to come off mute and ask it?
Yeah, hi. I was puzzled by the wording when you came to Charmouth, but I don't understand what defence adaptation means because it sounds a bit like an oxymoron to me.
I think, shall I take this one, Matt?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
I think there was an option that the consultant suggested when developing the outline business case, and that option was to research the longevity of the current defence. So I think it's a little bit of a grey area, to be honest, in terms of an eligible funding item, but it had been included in the outline business case, so we do need to shed some light on it.
I've just made a note, or I am making a note, Belinda, to get a bit more clarity on that in future events.
Yeah, it's just everyone I asked about it didn't quite understand what it meant either. So it's just kind of locally we're trying to say this is about adaptation rather than about coastal defence, and now you've got the two in one, in one phrase.
It is a bit confusing.
Isn't really,
I can see that. Yeah. Okay, I'll make sure that's clarified in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've had most people put in some responses, so I'll just give you another few seconds to get in there. If not, I'll let Elliot have his last slide. Okay, cool. So Elliot, sorry, your next slide. Look.
Cool. Yeah. So it was just a final note. So I just want to emphasise that it's an iterative project, particularly within phase one. That is an iterative process in terms of the fact that it does have a focus on research and refinement. So we do have the flexibility to change tack as we gather more data and as the project develops and we receive more community feedback. Obviously, that means it's important that communities stay engaged with these projects as they develop. But I just wanted to highlight as well that a key piece of work for each community is the adaptation plan, which could allow communities to leverage support in the future. So funding, for example. So with the adaptation plan, we will have several engagement events, which we'll obviously make you aware of in due course. But yeah, that's all from me. Thank you, Matt.
Brilliant. So I should have mentioned earlier in the agenda, we will have a Q&A, a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. So if you've got any questions at the moment, then maybe say I might answer some of them coming up in the next section. So feel free to hang on to those to the end, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So this next sort of section from me then is to go over the sort of engagement and recap the engagement that happened in 2024. So before talking about what's coming up in this year, yeah, a quick recap. So the full engagement summary, some pictures of which are on the screen there, are on our Have Your Say webpage. If you go into the project updates, you'll be able to find the PDF and download it and have a good read. But I'm not going to go through every single page here. You'll be glad to hear. We do want to get out and enjoy the sunshine, don't we? But I'm going to go through some of the sort of main headings and highlights really. So round one took place between, or round one of the engagement, as we call it, took place between March and the end of July last year. It consisted of community information events, stakeholder workshops and a survey. And the objectives was to raise awareness of the project, and it was called CTAP at the time, to collect preliminary data from the community and stakeholders. The drop-in event was attended by over 70 people, and the survey had 85 separate responses, so quite a good number considering the size of the community that we've got around Charmouth. Within the survey, respondents were asked for their opinions and preferences on an options list. And this option list was created at the workshop and drop-in events. So from the workshops, we collated together all the options into a long list. And this is the sort of first time we engaged on that. And we're, as you've heard from Elliot already, we're slowly sort of whittling those down into ones that are viable and ones that still have a strong preference for. So of the 15 proposed options, the top ones that you can see in the sort of graph on the right-hand side there were defence adaptation, access improvements to the beach and the beachfront as well, monitoring of the beach, the river and the cliffs, and the creation of behaviour assessments, rollback of the Heritage Coast Centre or potentially a pop-up centre, improving the flood and erosion resilience of the old cement factory building, so that is the Heritage Coast Centre, and then finally the top five, it was nature-based solutions to combat river flooding. Some other headlines from the survey, from some of the open questions that we put out there, was it was really obvious to us from the responses that the coast, its surrounding land and coastal property needs to be utilised effectively, and the Heritage Coast Centre, the CHCC, is vitally important for the village's economy. It's a real asset, and the feedback we got is that it must be kept near the beach rather than being like a pop-up centre at another location. The South West Coast Path also is a really vital asset that needs protection. It's a huge bringer in of visitors to the area, like walking through on their way on the coast path, and is also used a lot by the local community to walk their dogs or go for nice evening walks and things like that. Improved beach access, not just to the seafront, but also to the beach itself. So that might include ramps and trying to be inclusive so that the beach is accessible for everybody. The importance of maintaining, monitoring, improving drainage systems in response, in regards, to cliff drainage, was also voted as being quite important. Better signage, informing locals about erosion and flood risks, also came at quite high. And if there is a chance to enhance the environment of the seafront and coastline with nature-based solutions, then that's ideal. And even better if you can create new community spaces from land that might no longer serve its purpose in the future. So those are the sort of main headlines from last year. In 2025, so engagement round 2, as we're calling it, the project rebranded itself from CTAP to Future Coast Charmouth. We got the feeling that CTAP was a bit of a mouthful. No one really understood what it was about, so we've rebranded it to Future Coast Charmouth, which hopefully gives a bit more understanding what the project is about. So this year's engagement, it started with the release of our baseline survey on the 26th of May, and I'll chat more about that in a second. But our first sort of in-person event was at the River Dragon Festival on the 31st of May, and that was a great event, one that I hope if it goes ahead again in the near future, we'll be at again, hopefully. Both myself and my colleague Sarah both had a chance to hold a placard. You might get a picture of that in a minute. And we walked down to the beach behind Misty the Dragon in front of Lim the Dragon, I think it was Lynn. And we had great conversations with the community at the community hall afterwards, many of whom, it was interesting, hadn't come across the project before. So we actively engaged with around 60 people throughout the day, with people that we had met before, but also making new links and connections as well. So it was a really beneficial event, I think. And primarily we're using it to baseline survey and our future community events. Our most recent event was a couple of weeks ago on the 18th of June. Again, that was at the St Andrews Community Hall. We had about 31 people attend through the evening, which again, the weather was like it is now. So considering how great the weather was, we were quite thankful that some people turned up, I think, because everyone could have been in the pub potentially, I don't know. A mixture of people who had heard about the project before, but also some new faces, which was again nice to see. And tonight, we've presented our snapshots polls on some of the options viability in future events. There were wide-ranging discussions in the Q&A afterwards, including discussions on the shoreline management plan, what the project funding could and could not be used for, and that might come up in the Q&A again a bit later on. And it's provided us a bit more clarity on our future messaging as the project goes forward. In terms of our upcoming events, so as well as our drop-in event at the community hall and this online event, we'll be having a baseline sort of pop-up on the beach survey, or baseline on the beach afternoon. That's coming up on Thursday. That's continuing to promote the project and also promote the survey as well, the closing date being on the 13th of July. There should be a few of us down on the beach with a big blue gazebo to promote the project for those still not aware, and we'll be hopefully launching a newsletter at the same time, a quarterly Charmouth newsletter that we're going to send out alongside the project as well. So if you know anyone who hasn't been able to make it to the in-person event or this meeting, yeah, come and tell us to come and find us down at the seafront on Thursday. And again, I think the weather's going to be nice but not too hot, so yeah, come and enjoy an ice cream with us maybe. I'm also hoping to get to, or I'm intending to go to the Charmouth market on the 7th of July. That's only something I've only really become aware of over the last week or so. So again, that will give us a chance to further promote the event to people. There's a Future Coast steering group that's been created, and I'll have a talk about who's involved in that in a second. We had our first meeting a week or so ago, and this group will meet roughly every 8 weeks or so. And like I said, I'll run over who is part of that group in a second. Across the engagement we've done so far, there seems to be a real appetite from residents and the community to learn more about shoreline management plans, the entails maps that go along with those, and areas that may be at risk from coastal erosion in the future. So we're planning hopefully to develop an online workshop alongside Future Coast North Swanage for residents, businesses and landowners to help them develop the knowledge they need to find out more. The date's to be confirmed on that, but we've got a poll coming up in a second just to sort of see if that appetite is still there. We're also just hopefully about to click send on what's called a Mentimeter survey that will be circulated to local schools and colleges. It's a scaled down version of the baseline survey that's out at the moment, but yeah, it's well, I think my next slide might be talking about that. No, it's the poll. Here's the third poll coming up. Quite a simple one. Hopefully this one's just a yes and no one really, but I've just discussed how we're planning to run an online workshop on shoreline management plans. So to re-emphasize, this is aimed at everybody, so it includes homeowners, landowners, businesses, and it can help communities understand the risk from coastal erosion or flooding over different time periods, maybe understand what management approach is being planned for, and hopefully help understand the jargon that is inevitably used in all these sort of maps and documents. So we're sort of asking in this poll whether you think this workshop would be of use, and if so, would you actually attend it? And if you do think so, we might be asking in the future what sort of questions would you want answering, and then when we've got something set up, we'll put it on our on the website and our contact list as to when it's going to go on. So hopefully a pop-up has appeared in front of you. And again, it's only a very short one. A couple of minutes or so to do that. Not a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, sorry. You've ended it. Sorry, I've got so many slides up, Nikki. It's impossible to see how many polls we've got up. Okay, I'll lead on to our Mentimeter one then. So the Mentimeter student survey is to do with youth engagement, and traditionally we found as Dorset Coast Forum, not just the Charmouth project, but across all of our projects that go around Dorset, that the youth are traditionally a difficult demographic to engage with. So Dorset Coast Forum are actively pursuing youth engagement for all of our projects through our education hub, which we launched at the start of this year, and we'll be adding more resources onto that as we go through the next few years or so. We've also developed as Future Coast Dorset a student survey on something called Mentimeter, and as I said earlier, it's an adapted version of the baseline survey that students can fill in as part of fawn time, maybe a geography lesson, or as a homework assignment, and it just gives us more views across the whole spread of the community rather than just one particular demographic maybe. So longer term, we're also looking at creating some case study resources for GCSE and A-level students, something I've got a fair bit of experience in my previous role with doing, and this would mean that teachers could potentially teach lessons on the 2 locations and learn more about them, and potentially even lead field visits to the coast, possibly with input from ourselves as a project team. We've had limited interest from local primary schools so far on the project, but I'm hoping to do something with the local scout group in the future who have been interested in hearing a little bit more. So as mentioned quite a few times now, we've got a live baseline survey out at the moment. Some of you may have already filled it in. We've extended the deadline of this. It was the 6th of July, but we've extended it just to the 13th of July, just to give people a little bit more time to get in their views, following on some of the community events that we've been doing. And in the survey, we're asking for your views on coastal issues, your thoughts on coastal terms that are being used, and also similarly to what we've tonight, some preferences on some of the options that we're still testing the viability of. The community's response to the surveys will truly influence the direction the project may take. So please spread the word to any of you who've not filled it in, to any of you know anyone who hasn't filled it in. And remember, we are on the beach again on Thursday afternoon, should people want to know more and have missed our previous engagements this round. The surveys, there are paper copies of it in the library, and there are also paper copies in the Heritage Coast Centre. So if you prefer to do a paper version, you can sort of pop to those 2 locations and fill it in and bring it back, and I'll go and collect it after the survey has ended. So the steering group then, just to sort of mention who's on that then. So we've got representatives from quite a number of organisations that are on the group. And like I say, we meet roughly every 8 weeks or so. So we've got the Dorset Council FSUM team, so that's Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management team. We've got Dorset Council Emergency Management and Resilience team. We've got Dorset Council Planning team. Representatives from the Charmouth Parish Council on there, from the EA, the Environment Agency, Heritage Coast Centre. There's a whole list, isn't there? Green Space team on there. We're on there, obviously, Dorset Coast Forum and Jacobs, National Trust, Natural England, who just got in the next couple of days, the last few days as well. And we've also got some community representatives as well. We are working or still trying to get a representative from Wessex Water, as that's something that came up in the engagement last year, is that people would like Wessex Water to be involved in some way. I think we've got a couple of people from Wessex Water on the call, so hopefully we might get a representative from them. But yeah, we're still actively trying to engage with those with Wessex Water. Okay, so I think we've come to the Q&A session. I will stop sharing my screen, or try to, okay, and if there's any questions, so either put them in the chat so we can see them, or feel free to raise your hand and we can sort of come round and come round to those. How are we doing for questions? Belinda, I think, yes.
Hiya. I was just wondering whether or not you wanted to try the shops and the cafe for the surveys as well. And also the parish council, their office has an unlocked door at the bottom, and there's a shelf there where there's some community information. We could put a few there as well.
That could be useful. I have gone around with some posters and some of the main sort of cafes and shops and things, and they were all very helpful.
Oh, okay.
In their shops and things. I think I have seen there was definitely a sort of spike in the couple of days after doing that. But yeah, there's a few I missed. I think I was there on a sort of a late Friday afternoon where some was shut, so I can definitely sort of try again.
It might be worth asking. I did a road survey. I've got a road survey, road safety survey going at the moment. But the shops, they're really keen when I offer them, and then they kind of forget, so they get put underneath things. But
yeah, just
as it's the last kind of couple of weeks, it might be worth trying the shops because they're well used by the locals.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I just made a note for the parish council. Sort of, you said it was a sort of door that you can sort of drop things through.
Yeah, it's next to the library. It's just sort of one building down from the library, sort of down some steps, and there's an open door.
Yeah, thank you.
And then there's a key lock thing if you actually want to go up to the offices, but there's a shelf that has a few community information leaflets. So I sometimes leave things down there.
Thank you. We've got a question from Nicholas. What can the money be spent on? I might bring you in on that one, Elliot.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so the money can be spent on essentially what is being put under the sort of umbrella term of adaptation and transition actions. So we had at the OBC stage, we worked with the communities to look at what those options or actions might be. So we've just essentially had a long list, and we've been refining that through community engagement. And now what we're asking people to vote on earlier was some of the options we're actually looking at. So those are some of the options that the money can be spent on. And they're the options that have come through the engagement as popular options, basically. It doesn't mean that we're just restricted to spending money on those options. As a sort of the bottom line is, we can't fund the improvement or replacement of defence, basically. Like the seawall, for example, it's not something we can fund, but we can look at these adaptation and transition options. Hopefully that answers your question, but if you want any further clarity, just let me know.
Thanks for your message, Vicky, about agreeing to have a chat with us. Yeah, well, I think we'll try and get hold of you in the future. Yeah, Belinda, is that another question, or is that from your question beforehand?
Is my hand still up?
It is, I think, yeah. So I haven't used
No,
Zoom
it wasn't another
so,
question. Sorry, it was a legacy hand, but I was going to ask. I think Elliot's just effectively answered the question, but I was going to clarify this business about defence adaptation. That, from what I understand, you're saying you could do a proposal, but then that proposal would then have to apply for funding from elsewhere.
Yeah, effectively.
Yeah.
So we could look at I think the consultants were suggesting we could look at the longevity of that defence, and potentially off the back of that, there might be some sort of proposal. But yeah, we wouldn't be able to fund that, like you say, through the CTEP funding.
So you'd only be able to do the research, not even work up a proposal that could be used.
I would have to clarify
that the parish council,
the Environment Agency,
because I think that's
the
difficulty, area. Isn't it? At this kind of community level, we don't have the skills here to be able to do the funding proposals in a way that they are, if you like, oven ready for funds. So if the skills in this project could help the community to do that, that might actually be quite a useful.
Yeah, that's a good insight. Thank you. We'll get some clarity around what that exactly entails when we next meet with Jacobs, and then we can talk about that again in the future.
The next question that came in was from Andrew. Are there any updated maps for forecast erosion of shoreline over time? Yes, there is. That's the sort of what we were talking about earlier with the shoreline management plan sort of workshop we might be using. There are maps available. They're not necessarily the most user-friendly. Sometimes, I think anyway, not necessarily the most user-friendly. So that's where hopefully this workshop will come in. But I'll try and put the link to them in a second. But I think I've always found them by searching for Shoreline Management Plan Explorer or SMP Explorer, or you search NCERM2 maps, you should come up with them. And they allow you to put in sort of different time scales. I think it's 2055 and 2105. Sarah's just put it in the chat. Amazing, thank you. And look at different sort of scenarios based on climate scenarios and predictions in the future. And they usually work around the sort of 75%, 95% percentile or 75, 90% chance of following those scenarios. And it allows you to see potential areas that might erode and areas that might be at risk from cliff stability as well. But yeah, this is essentially what we're hoping to do with some of these workshops. I think there is an appetite for people to see these and look at their houses or look at their land and see how this might change in the future. Hopefully that's answered your question on that. And then Nicholas, the question, does that mean the sea will be allowed to erode and not be maintained?
I can answer this one. So we won't be maintaining it after 2025. So it'll be, any sort of ad hoc repairs would happen, up until the end of this year. We will, however, be maintaining it to keep it legal and safe. So it won't be maintained, to extend the lifespan or to, for it to serve as, you know, a defence asset, but we will be keeping it safe.
Cool, thank you. I'm looking down, everyone. It's because I'm writing down your questions, so I make sure we're answering them properly. Or I might get back to you in the future if not.
Can I just jump in again on that one? Because at the public meeting, I think it was explained that responsibility for the maintenance of the coastal defences passes from Dorset Council to the parish council at the end of 2025, and I was really surprised by that. I've not heard that before, and I don't think it's generally known. Is that true? Or have I misunderstood?
I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. I think so there is no responsibility to maintain it beyond 2025. However, Dorset Council have a responsibility to keep it legal and safe, basically. So they would have to work with the parish if there was any sort of significant event. In terms of who actually owns the asset, that's a lot more nuanced, and I think you'd have to speak to Sean Norsworthy, the project engineer, to understand that a bit better.
Okay. Oh, well, we're doing that this week, aren't we?
Yeah.
Another question from Andrew, which might be one for yourself, Elliot. Could the position on funding for the seawall change in the future?
I think it would be unlikely that you would see a government fund being put towards that, just because we've got a shoreline management plan policy here. It's been established for a long time. There is potentially, after 2027, they may review the S&P for the area. It doesn't necessarily mean it will change, though. If it did change, potentially, there could be a case, but I think it's very unlikely to change, and I wouldn't expect it to do so.
Belinda.
Sorry, I've just remembered I had a chat with our MP on Friday, I think it was, very briefly. And he said he'd been talking to UNESCO about World Heritage Site status generally, but also about the Jurassic Coast, obviously, as he's our MP. And he said that they were absolutely clear that if coastal defences started to be maintained, that we would lose World Heritage Site status, or, in the areas where they've been designated as no active intervention, and that allowing nature to take its course is part of the designation, that they're all linked together, which I hadn't really appreciated before.
Yeah, thanks, Belinda. I didn't know that.
I know there are certain sections of the World Heritage Site, like places like Weymouth, for example, that are very built up that aren't technically part of the World Heritage Site itself. There's actually, if you look on the maps, there's always a bit of a gap because they're so built up and maintained. So I think, yeah, following on from what Belinda said, that sort of follows in with what's happened to other more built up areas around the coastline. Sarah.
Yeah, I'm just going to respond to what Belinda said. It is a surprise to a lot of people, Belinda, that, and it makes me wonder, as you've asked the question, with that information, that's probably something else, Matt, that we could help clarify. And we have the capacity to do that because we have Sam Scrivens, who maybe some of you know, who's now aligned with the DCF team. And I think that might be a workshop or a presentation that Sam could do, maybe, Matt? Across the two sites, because I remember when he told me the same a while ago, and it was a little bit, but it actually makes sense as well. So I think it's worth noting that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. There was a question I was thinking of before this presentation started, actually. As Elliot said earlier, we're looking at the different options for access to the beach, and especially access to West Beach. And we've heard from a lot of communities so far that when the tide goes out and you've got that really sandy section in front of the seawall currently, that's potentially where a lot of the visitors or maybe even the residents end up going to. And it's actually that bit that's sometimes very difficult to get access to. So when we're talking about access to the West Beach in the surveys, we'd really want to know sort of what form of access do you want that to take? Do you want it to be access across the bridge that's over the sort of boulders by the Heritage Coast Centre at the moment, or is it more access to do with the sandy beach, and should it be accessing both of those as well? I don't know if any of you on the call at the moment have any sort of response or any thoughts on that, because I think that's something we might need to engage a bit more about in the future. Maybe not. Oh, both. Yeah, that's the feeling we got from the in-person event, was actually both access is needed, but maybe it will take in the future might take the form of one bit of access that allows access to both of those sections. I think that's something we're trying to get back from the surveys, really. Well, I've just started sharing my screen again, partly by accident, but I don't know if there were any questions anymore. If not, we'll carry on. Okay, so our last poll, really, then, before we let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening and enjoy the sunshine. Basically just get a bit of feedback on how you felt the level of information was presented tonight. So if we do more of these in the future, which hopefully we will, we know whether or not we're a bit too boring, just about right. So the responses are anonymous, so you can be as honest as you like. And I'll let you fill that in. But we say thank you, and I'll put up some contact details. Cool, thank you. So, well, thank you everyone for giving up your evening, but coming to us and chatting to us this evening and finding out some of your preferences. My contact information is on the screen now. Should you want to get in contact with us, with me again, or for general inquiries, you've got the Future Coast Dorset email up there. Also, if you've got the QR code there, you can scan that to access the Future Coast Charmouth webpage, the Have Your Say page, and that's where you can get the survey as well. Like am I not? Oh, that's no good, is it? What's happening? Let's try again. Let's try again.
Matt, while you're doing that, Belinda's just put a good question into the chat.
Sorry, I can't. Okay,
Can you see it, or do you want me to read it out?
Can you
see it, Elliot, and take
that?
that?
Yeah. So Belinda, you're asking about messaging we could think about, which would involve the future of the village itself. I think that's a good point. I mean, that should be consolidated in the adaptation plan, because within the adaptation plan, we will be looking at the future of the village, basically, and looking at trigger point for set actions, and that should consolidate all of the work that we're doing through the project. So there will be a point of engagement, or 2 points of engagement there at least for community. For communities to get involved in that discussion and to sort of, I suppose, co-create the adaptation plans.
Okay, because I think I'm getting the impression that people are thinking it's just about the beach, or occasionally people might think it's about the river, but they're not realizing it's really about.
It's about Charmouth.
It's about Charmouth and its future. I think, I don't know. It's hard to say what people think.
Okay, I think I've sorted myself out, so hopefully you can all see the contact details on the screen now. So yeah, you've got my email address there, should you wish to contact me a bit in the future, or for general inquiries, you've got the Future Coast Dorset page there. And then you can scan that QR code, and it is on all of our sort of literature that we've sent out on Facebook and everything else as well. So you can scan that to get to the Future Coast Charmouth webpage and get access to the project updates, where you'll find the engagement stakeholder summary from last year, and you'll also be able to access the survey as well. I think that's everything from me. I'll let you, we finished a little bit early, which is always nice. So we can enjoy the sunshine. The link to project page has just been put in the chat by Nikki. Melanie, yeah, if you can come down on Thursday, that'd be great to come and have a chat. But yeah, if there's no other questions, I'll let you get back to the rest of your evening. Oh,
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah. Andrew, I think many people with frontline housing have no idea what the issues they face in the future. Instead, people think it's the beach. Okay, so more clarity on that needed, Andrew. Okay, I'll make a note of that and we'll work on that. Thank you.